All right, let's go ahead and get started. Um, my name is Marty Cardenas. I'm the secondary math facilitator, and I also get the honor and privilege of taking over academic RTI, so I'm super excited about that and happy that MJ entrusted me with academic RTI because I know that's something she led. So again, if you have the note catcher, if you can go ahead and get that out, we're going to be using that throughout. It also has some links on there for the Google site, which is going to be really important if you haven't opened that up yet. The Google site has, sorry, let me turn the music off, has all the information for today, and so this is going to be a link that you want to save because it'll have all of the resources for academic RTI. Any updates will be on there. Things that you see today are all going to be on the site. So if you can save that link, that's going to be really important. All the other resources that MJ had on the Google Drive are still there, and we'll look at those later as well, so you can access those. So there's some links there, again, on your note catcher with all of this information. All right, so let's jump into it. Some of the norms for today, one of them is be curious. We have a wealth of knowledge in this room today, so I encourage you to be curious about the different processes that we're going to look at, the different structures and resources and things like that. Another one is be vulnerable. We don't all have all the answers for everything, so I encourage you to be vulnerable today. And then be the participant you want to have. We all know the participant we want in our staff meetings, so I encourage you to be that participant today. So the general structure of this session today is going to be very similar to what if you've been in MJ sessions in the past. It has the same structure, but there's some updates throughout that you'll see based off of the new things that are going on this year. All right, so we're going to start off with a 3-2-1 KWL. So on your note catcher, there's a table there that you can add those 3 things that you know, 2 things that you wonder, and at the end of the session, we'll fill in that last column with the 1 thing that you learned. And as soon as you finish, share with your tables. And then I'll call in a few tables here in about 2 minutes or so to kind of share out 1 or 2 things. So I'll call in 2 people here in a second. So give about 2 minutes to do that. To about 15 more seconds. All right, so I'm going to ask 2 people if you can share something you know, and then somebody else share something you wonder. Is there any volunteers? Yes, awesome, thank you so much.
Just how to make progress with older students who are performing at a lower level.
Older students performing at a lower level. Awesome. That's a great wonderment. Got one?
Yeah, which do you want things?
Either one.
Okay.
I'll let you decide.
3 things I know. education and training, and I think that comes back to us, so that's kind of what I do.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yep.
All right, so let's start off with MTSS, our multi-tiered systems of support. All right, so if you've been in this presentation, you probably see MJ's umbrella. So those three things that fall under MTSS are academic RTI, which I'm supporting this year. We also have social emotional support, and then our behavior RTI, which Dr. McGee is supporting both of those. So if you need any help or support with the social emotional or behavior, you can reach out to Dr. McGee for those. And then also, anytime you see that little paper with a pencil on it on the bottom right corner, those are things that you can fill out on your note catcher. All right. So we have the three big state mandates that relate to academic RTI. The first one is SB 1153, which are the big three of RTI that fall under the law, which is parent notification, which is important, documentation, and progress monitoring. So those are the big three that we got to make sure we do to follow the law. And then there's also dyslexia, which falls under Marna Linneberry. If you need support with that, you can contact her. And then House Bill 1416, formerly known as 4545, falls under Lisa Molinar. And you can reach out to her for support. And remember that those 1416, when teachers are logging those interventions, they can apply for RTI. We just got to make sure if they are applying to RTI that we make sure those are specific to the goals that we put in that RTI documentation. Any questions about those three mandates, state mandates? Awesome.
What was the last one, Maury? You said documentation.
So anytime the teachers are documenting interventions in 1416, they can apply to RTI. But we just got to make sure if it does apply to RTI, those are specific to the goals. Oh, you need the third one. What is that? Oh, the big three. The big three. So parent notification, yep. Parent notification, documentation, and progress monitoring. Yes, please feel free to stop me at any point in time. All right, so let's take a minute to really think about the purpose. I think this is going to be one of the crucial pieces. Anytime we're implementing any type of system, we want to make sure we understand the why. So just put in your own words, what you believe is the purpose of RTI. And I'll try to find some tables that haven't answered yet. Give it about 20 more seconds. All right, so let's come back. So I'm going to ask this table right here, what are some things that y'all think of as far as the purpose of RTI? Anything that you want to share? Help students grow. I love that. Simple, but true. How about at this table?
To ensure that every student receives a high level of quality instruction and support.
Love that. Every student receives high quality instruction and support. Did you want to share, Dr.?
I was just saying, early intervention. We want to do it early.
Yeah.
So they don't continue to struggle.
Great point. Great point. Awesome. So those are perfect. They hit the nail on the head. And so Here it says the GPISD academic RTI is a systematic process that ensures every child receives the additional time and support needed to learn at high levels. And I think each of you hit that at a certain level in different ways. So thank you for that feedback. I also like Mike Maddows's quote here on RTI, on teachers. There's no way that a single teacher has all the time, all the knowledge, and all the skills to meet the needs of every child. So we got to make sure we're supporting those. And part of that is through the RTI process when we're able to bring in more people, more time, and things like that to make sure our students can learn at those high levels. So any questions about the why behind academic RTI? All right, so what is it? And so it's not a place. We don't put students in RTI. It's not a pathway to SPED. And it's not a verb. We don't RTI students. It's just, RTI is an intensity of instructional support provided to a student. So it's the supports that we're providing our students, and of course there's the different tiers. So I'm gonna ask Ms. Tedesco if you can kind of speak a little bit to the SPED side of it, and let me give you the microphone that way. Thank you.
Okay, so I know most of you, but for those of you I don't know, I'm Rachel Tedesco. I am over the diagnosticians, and I'm a facilitator in the special education department. And we work very closely with your campus teams to make sure that you are identifying the right areas of deficit for the students where they need interventions. But RTI for academics, it's crucial. All struggling students, as we know, cannot be placed into special education because we only have 13 disability categories. And so we have to really hone in on the students that truly need the support. So RTI is an important piece of the educational system. It's used, as y'all said, it's used to identify those struggling students early and intervene quickly, and by providing those supports. And it's in place for a reason. These interventions are critical and should be implemented with a smaller number of students who truly need that additional support and services. And you know, where we talk about that RTI is not a pathway to special education, we just need to be careful when we're looking at students who we say the data supports them being on tiered interventions. But if your campus has an expectation that you're having referral meetings every week, then that's not what is actually best for students, and it's not sustainable. Your teachers are spending so much time with those intervention documentation and evidence plans that they lose that time with the differentiation of instruction in the Tier 1 piece. And there's kind of been a growing trend towards that, where kids are being referred weekly. And that top tier, so you know, your Tier 2 is interventions, specific intensive interventions, and then Tier 3 is even more intensive. And that number is supposed to be a small number of students. So your Tier 3 students, if you are seeing some progress, even if it's slow progress, it's still progress, and that just may be what that student's learning looks like. You know, you all are very familiar with global learners. We frustrate people so much when we say that a student has those global learning deficits, and it's because they don't meet a disability condition. They are truly doing the best that they can, and that's unfortunately not what special education was designed for. And so those students, their Tier 1 may look a little different than everybody else's Tier 1, and it doesn't necessarily mean they need to be pushed to an evaluation through special education. So that top tier, once you have those kids going through Tier 3, it's designed to be a very small number of students. And then some of those students, by the time they've gone through Tier 2 and Tier 3, we would expect some progress. So then when you get through that Tier 3, you should have an even smaller number of students who need to be referred for special education, and that's when you call in your specialist, and that's your assessment team. Those are the highly trained individuals. And the reason it's a small number is because the specialists, there's fewer of them. And that's why we have to be very conscientious about who we are actually referring. And it's very hard to tease out, did they just lose instruction? What's going on? Do they just need this intensive intervention time and time to grow? I think that's mainly what I wanted to say. So we are in a critical area this year with our assessment team. We have 10 school psychologists for the whole district, and so that's why we need your help with ensuring that the intervention data is done with fidelity. And I just want to leave you with this statistic. So 4 out of 5 students who are in special education and identified with learning disabilities don't actually have a disability at all. They just never learned how to read. And so that's a pretty staggering statistic, and that probably has that has impacted our district as well. And that's going back to why your job is so important, to help those teachers with identifying, and then we'll help you too, because we're here to help you identify those areas and make sure that the interventions are targeting the right areas. Thank you.
All right, so that's kind of what it is, and so kind of broken down by tiers. We might have seen these different tiers before. So tier 1 is just our 100% of our students are in tier 1, just the general instruction. This is one of the most important pieces for RTI, is making sure our tier 1 instruction is good. And then we have our tier 1 watch. So those students that might not fall into tier 2 and tier 3, but just need that extra support in our instructional time, so that might be putting them into small groups and just kind of keep an eye and checking on them that way. Tier 2 is about 15% of our students fall into tier 2. So again, it shouldn't be a large number. It should be just 15% of our students for that have that extra intervention, about 60 minutes per week. And then our tier 3 are the students that need that urgent intervention. Only 5% of our students, about 90 minutes per week. So those are the different tiers that each student falls in, and we'll look more into how to put those students in each of those tiers. And then again, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with just tier 1 instruction and how important that piece is, making sure that we're differentiating and meeting as many students as we can in that tier 1 instruction. If tier 1 instruction is not working, then RTI is not working, because we have too many students that need that extra support. So if we can get our teachers to determine student learning outcomes, share them with students, plan those common formative assessments, and then also making sure we have a day to actually reteach. A lot of times that's not built into a lesson plan, is that time to reteach those things that they didn't get. And having that common assessment is important as well, because the teachers, when they teach the lesson for the first time, they're teaching it to the best they can. They don't go to a lesson trying to teach 80% of their ability to teach that content. They usually teach the best they can. So they need those common informative assessments, so that when they plan together with other teachers, they can ask, your students did well on this lesson here, what are you doing? And then that way they can reteach it, because if they reteach it exactly how they did the first time, it's probably going to get the same results. Oops.
It's amazing how the kids who we thought couldn't make it before, it's amazing how the kids who we thought couldn't make it before provide more and more. If we started replacing provide more and more remedial track.
Oh, I clicked on his session. There is a webinar if you want to learn more about where I got those graphics. The webinar is linked on there as well. All right, so jumping into MAP, Universal Screener, that's what we've been doing last week and this week. And there's a toolkit on that website if you want to learn more about MAP itself. And we also have our awesome NWA representative Miranda here with us to answer any questions. So you might have seen this graphic from the assessment department before, just kind of breaking down which assessment falls into which grade level. Lisa is doing a session. If you didn't go to her session this morning, she has another session this afternoon on how to access the Edugence reports. So make sure if you're able to join that, you join that. The Zoom link is there. And so all the reports are already starting to populate. They're not, all the data isn't already in, but it should be in by next week, hopefully. And so we'll have that there. And then, of course, if you need support on the language of assessment, you can reach out to the bilingual department. If you need help on anything with administration of MAP or Edugence, you can reach out to the assessment department. Questions on accommodation, you can reach out to the SPED department. And then any type of instructional support, you can reach out to TNL, the different content facilitators there. So any questions so far on MAP and how it's going? All right, so I do want to let's take about 2 minutes just to kind of reflect on our MAP processes so far at your tables. And then we'll come back. So again, just at your tables, if you can just kind of reflect on how MAP has been going, the implementation of it so far, and then we'll come back. Sure. All right, so let's do a few share outs. We can go ahead and come back. We'll do a few share outs and then continue on. So is there anybody that wants to share out or have any questions or anything like that? Just about the different processes or the assessments or anything like that?
We just shared that it's, even though we kind of went through all the trainings with Lisa until we got in and we saw the teachers, what it looked like from the teacher side, there were still a lot of things that we learned, like that first day, and changes we made kind of moving forward.
Awesome. Yeah, and hopefully that's going to be, it's definitely a learning process anytime we're doing something new. So hopefully as we continue on, MOY is going to be even better, and we'll know exactly what it looks like so we can know exactly how to support. Great point. Anybody else want to share out or have any questions? Is there anything? Go ahead, Tamara.
A couple of things. First, I think for middle of year, like getting all of those technology issues kind of ironed out. I heard several people say like we were still trying to map out iPads and get them in students' hands, and maybe some of the devices, like backup devices, needed to be re-imaged, like all of those pieces. So we'll have that like knowledge for middle of year, and then even as we move into next year, like thinking about, does the window need to be adjusted some to let us like get into school for a couple of weeks? And so that's something I've heard from multiple levels. And then my personal thinking about like language of assessment, like making sure that we're in alignment with the science and how that looks, because I know that is much different from what we've ever done before. So if there's questions about like, okay, who's taking science in English? Who's taking it in EduGents? I can also support with that.
And then I know the last group had some questions about timing, about students' timing on the assessment, and some of the students were taking longer than others, and so making sure we encourage them to continue moving forward, even though they might not understand it. The whole point is for us to understand what they understand, what they don't understand, so they may or may not know a question and not spending a lot of time on questions they don't know, and just moving on. So that's a really important piece as well, because that's a big thing that we noticed, especially from the first session they brought that. We had a great conversation about that. Miranda, is something you wanted to add? Okay. Perfect. Any other questions? All right, so I just quickly pulled one of the reports on EduGents, and just kind of speaking to what the RIT, the RIT score, and the percentile, and how they relate. So the higher they get on their RIT score, the higher their percentile is. And so the RIT score, that scale is going to stay the same from kindergarten all the way to high school. So they're going to be on that same scale. So it's going to be really easy to see that growth because we can compare it, that same number throughout. So that makes it really nice. But if we want to compare and kind of see where they're at in their grade level, that percentile is going to help us identify that. And so you can see if a student gets, this is a 7th grade. I pulled a 7th grade report here. So if a student gets 263 RIT score, in this case right now, they're in the, 163, they're in that first percentile. If they're at a 230 RIT score, they're in the 71st percentile. So that means they did better than 71% of the students in that same peer group. And so that's where that normed comes in. And then, so 163, they're in that first percentile. And then I think 230, the 230 RIT score, they're 71 percentile. So they did better than 71% students in that same peer group. Good question. And then you can see these 4 goals. One important thing to know about the goals, they're not the goals that we want to get on the RIT score. They are the instructional areas, which relate to the reporting categories for STAR. All right, so we can see like a student here falls in that range, 195 to 209 here in the first goal, so that's that first reporting category. And so that easily identifies where they need the most support in for that instructional area. So just be cognizant that the goals, these 4 goals, if you see a range like that, those are the instructional areas. There will also be goals in the reports that will be populating the fall to winter goal, so where we expect them to be with their risk score, and then a fall to spring goal as well that you'll see in those reports. Any questions about that? And again, if you want to learn how to pull those reports and where they're at and things like that, make sure you attend Lisa's session this afternoon. Do y'all know if she's going to be recording? It's recorded? Okay, perfect. So she'll have that. I'll add her presentation on the website as well, the Google site, if you miss it.
Is there a time frame for each goal, or is it just based on each student? If they meet that goal 1, the teacher will proceed to goal 2?
Good question. So remember, these 4 goals are the instructional areas. They're not actual goals. So MAP actually, NWH, if you want to speak to that terminology.
So when you see that goal, that doesn't mean this is what we, oh yeah, that's right. This doesn't mean this is what we want our kids to do. This means on this actual assessment that they took, we not only give you an overall RIT for, in this case, math, but we also say in each of those 4 instructional areas, so when you see goal, think instructional area, we know how they did in that each of those 4 areas. So that way you can start to look across and see their overall might be 219, but they might have an instructional area that they were significantly lower in and maybe one that they were significantly higher in. So that way it's that jumping off point of knowing what area am I going to need to help students with to grow them, and also start looking instructionally about, do I have upcoming units that might be harder for me to get my kids engaged in than others based off of how they're scoring in the individual instructional areas. So one reason we changed the language is I wasn't a part of the decision why it was called goal in the first place, but it is misleading. So it's not about a target. It's about what happened on the test. Yes, reporting categories.
Reporting categories. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, so good point. So like this in 7th grade for math, it could be geometry is goal 1, numbers and operations is goal 2, statistics is goal 3, things like that. So those are the instructional areas. And so in EduGence, when you see, it'll specifically say like F to W, that's your like fall to winter goal. And then like F to S, that's your fall to spring goal. And then can you speak to like how to look at that and what that means, the goal?
Yes. So first I'm going to start with just a little tip as you're working with your teachers, because I've been using this assessment from teacher up. And sometimes it's hard because when you're working across grade levels, the context of that RIT score changes. So the scale doesn't change, but a 219 in 2nd grade means something very different than a student who scored 219 in 9th grade. So one tip would be the common language you have across your grade levels and across your subjects is the percentile. It gives you the context of where they were in that norming sample. So just a personal tip that's kind of easy, because I remember the days of teachers coming to me and asking me, is 216 good? And I'm like, out of context, I can't tell you what's the percentile. That's our common language, right? Now, as far as our projected growth, when students meet that projected growth, it maintains where they currently are. And that's important to keep in mind, because not all of your students are where we want them to be.
So in that lens of RTI, we would hope that if we're giving really great Tier 1 instruction and we're supporting students with interventions, that we would see more than typical growth for those kids because they're getting more support. The goals are tailored to students just like them. So remember, we look at the grade level, the subject, the weeks of instruction, and where they started. And then we know that kids just like them typically grow this much. So when we're working with intervention, we would hope that they can exceed those goals because that's the only way we can raise their achievement. So if they only meet it and they're at the 5th percentile, they stay at the 5th percentile.
I have a question. So the goal ranges are overlapping, some of them overlap each other, like for example, the 1st percentile. So I guess without looking at the form or the goals itself, does it show the teachers the skills within that range? Does that make sense?
Yes, so we are working with adjuvants, and you will have access to our learning continuum. That is where you can actually get very specific into a grade level and a RIP band and see not only the standards, but the level of rigor within the standards that the student was interacting with.
And that's based on skills.
It's based on our,
Grade level.
it's based on, well, without getting too in depth, because we're going to have more training around that, but it's going to inform the TEKS and then the actual learning statements within the TEKS.
So basically, like if we look at the top student on the very top row, we can see goal 3, whatever that instructional area is they're going to need the most support in that instructional area. And so when we have access to that learning continuum, we can see exactly under that learning continuum where that RIP band falls and what supports they need specifically for that RIP band. What areas, like for this specific standard, what standards they're ready for, what content under that RIP band they're ready for, and how we need to support them. Yes?
So is the lowest range where they need the most support?
Yes, generally, yep. Yes?
This might have been brought up in other trainings that I've been able to go to, but we look at the 20th percentile and above to determine tier 2,
Mm-hmm.
tier 3, and
Correct.
other data points.
Yep.
Is this the same?
That is the same.
It is.
Yeah, and we'll look at a draft. We're still working with the assessment department on what that looks like, the drill down spreadsheet, but we'll get into the drill down here in a little bit, what that could possibly look like. Good question. All right, speaking of the drill down process. So just kind of a reminder, when we're doing the drill down process, we want to make sure all of the students that we're supporting with RTI is no more than 20% of our students, and 15% of that fall in Tier 2, which is our regular intervention, and then 5% is that urgent intervention that fall under Tier 3. All right, and that's about 90 minutes per week, and then the Tier 2 is about 60 minutes per week on that. And so, like we were talking about earlier, we want to start at that 20th percentile cut point. That's where we're starting for our drill down process. But again, it's a starting point. So if you have more than 20% of your students falling in that 20th percentile, we want to make sure we lower that percentile so that there's only 20% that we're supporting with RTI. And so I wanted to show just kind of a draft of a spreadsheet. Again, it's not finalized. We're still working on what that looks like. Let me see. So you can click on that link there, and it'll take you to that draft. So the nice thing about Edugents is that it brings all of our identifiers in. So I just pulled the report, one of the reports that you can find in Edugents that has all of those identifiers already there. It has the ELA and the math scores in there. The nice thing about spreadsheets as well, that you can filter, you can delete, you can customize, you can highlight. It also brought in the star scores, things like that, so I can easily highlight. In orange, I highlighted SPED, and you can see dyslexia is highlighted, at risk, eco disadvantage, they're all brought in there, so I can quickly see what students I need to meet about and what departments I need to bring in to help support, whether it's counseling, SPED, or 504, whatever it is, ESL, bilingual. We can bring in the departments based off what their identifiers are and see exactly what those students need. So I just quickly highlighted the students here that fall in that 20th percentile, so I know what students to look at. I also highlighted them for math, so I'll just need to filter when I'm working with the math. I can filter them, and I can also see them side by side on what students have already been identified for reading, and then that'll help me identify the math as well. And again, making sure all of those students combined are 20%, and this is, I think this is 7th grade as well, one in the campuses. So this, again, this is a draft. We're still working on exactly what that looks like. And then as soon as we get, so this week is our last week of testing. So next week, as soon as we get all the data in, we're able to actually pull in those reports. And then I'll create a video on the breakdown of how to go through that drill down process. And I'll put that on the Google site. But next week, we should have everything ready to go. And assessment department is working with us on that, what that spreadsheet looks like. So any questions on this, on the drill down process so far? All right. September 19th, I'll also, during a Tuesday training, I'll also be here doing drill down supports if you need extra support with that. So that video, again, is coming soon. As soon as we have all the data in, we can see exactly what that looks like in Edgerton's, and we can get that to you. Those will be done for you in your Google Drives. Assessment department will do those for you. And that way you can have that starting point. Again, it's just a starting point. You'll really need to bring in your different departments, different areas of needs, and really see what those students need as you're creating those goals.
And I can come and sit with you and work on that as well, if you're needing additional support. If you'll remember last year, how on some campuses, like, we would come and like sit and go through the drill down, so I can come with and help with that.
So any other questions on the drill down process? Awesome. All right, so moving into Edgerton's, again, if it's not an Edgerton's, it didn't happen. So that's really important to know. And then there's a link there if you need some more supports. Rachel, do you want to speak on the Edgerton's documentation?
We were just talking earlier about
The microphone.
so if you're documenting for the House Bill 1416, if you're using that as your documentation for interventions, tier 2 or tier 3, just be sure that the interventions are very specific, because a lot of the House Bill documentation that I've seen is not specific to skills that the student is struggling in. So it needs to be sure to read whatever that intervention is and what it's targeting. So it's very clear that it's a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention. Oh, so we will, it is very important when you do feel like a student is ready to be referred, we will ask, we will pull up Edugents and look at that data, and if that documentation isn't in there, we will ask for that to be put in there. Especially, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we're in this critical, we have a very limited staff, so that's why we're going to be looking super closely at that documentation, and it has to be in there. It has to be specific, and if you need help making sure that you're targeting the right deficit areas, your assessment staff can help with that. I'm always happy to come and look at data with you. I love digging through data. So that's why it is so important that it is in EduGens. That's the first place that we go to start looking at those interventions and what you've been targeting and how the student has been progressing. And it's very important to have in there the intervention that was provided, the skill that was targeted, what assessment was given at the end of the intervention, and how did the student do. Like, not just unsatisfactory, because we're going to say, well, what does unsatisfactory look like? So if you need help with any of it, I'm always happy to talk about all those things.
So HB 1416 is grade level instruction, correct? So if a student is receiving services for RTI and for HB, and we document for the RTI skill phase, and sometimes the skill is not on grade level, is that okay?
Yes, absolutely, because you are supposed to be targeting that skill where they're struggling, and that's not going to be a grade level skill. If you're working with the student on the grade level work, then that's tutoring. So where you get into the tier 2 and the tier 3 interventions is where you are digging down into that deficit area that's keeping them from accessing that grade level content.
All right. Any other questions? All right, so some of the next steps that are coming up, making sure that you do your beginning of the year RTI staff training, so making sure you're using what we're going over here and everything that your staff needs to know about RTI. And so you can, Worth added her slide deck here, and here in a second she'll kind of talk about her process, but making sure you complete that staff training. We talked about the drill down process, making sure you complete that so you can identify which students are going to be supported through RTI. And then after you do that, you'll need to do your decision point meetings based off your RTI process, your drill down process with your different committee members. You'll also need to make sure you activate all your students in EduGens. There's a link there that kind of guides you through that process on activation, so making sure that your students get the supports they need. And then we'll have our one-on-one beginning of the year meetings, presentations as well, so you can go ahead and start scheduling those. I have a link there for you to schedule, and there's some details on exactly what those presentations should entail. There's also, if you go back into MJ's Google Drive, shared drive, which I also have linked on my site, it has videos from the previous year, so if you want to go see what your campus did the previous year, those are on there as well. And then lastly, of course, really structuring and making sure those interventions are intentional. And so, like we've been saying, like Rachel said, making sure we're being intentional and supporting them on exactly what those goals are, progress monitoring, and making sure we create those structures. There's some supports for intervention as well, that we structure that. So, mm-hmm.
If you had high impact tutoring funds as part of T-class, I know we spent a lot of time like side by side working with campuses on that. And so I'm the person you would email to talk more about it, not just for math, but then also for the reading side and how we can support with tutoring.
Can I ask a question? So that
Yes.
the one-on-one, is that basically like the trend analysis we used to do?
Yes.
Okay.
Trend analysis, yep. And so there you can go back and kind of see in that Google Drive. Let me show you real quick. So if you go into that Google Drive that we have access to, if you go under Archive and under 22-23, under the Trend Analysis, PowerPoint recording, all of them are recorded, so you can go to your campus and see what it looked like last year. Especially if you're new to a campus, you can see how it was presented the previous year.
How did you get there? I'm sorry.
I clicked a bunch of folders. So we have the shared drive. If you don't have access to that, please reach out to me, and I can get you access to that shared drive. Also, please don't delete anything or move anything out. But if you open up this shared drive, GPISD Academic RTI, you go down to the archive folder. You click on last year's 22-23 folder, and then you'll click on the Campus Trends Analysis PowerPoint folder. All right, so I'm going to ask Ms. Worth if she can share a little bit about how those processes look on her campus, and then we'll have time to collaborate and share at our tables as well.
So I shared the beginning of the year RTI staff training PowerPoint that I do. We do it at the beginning of the year during pre-service, just so our teachers have an idea as to what is coming. And then they also get a list of their students that were currently served on Tier 2 or Tier 3 the previous year, so that they can start day one knowing those kids, if they have any accommodations. And then I simplify it for them as we move forward. I don't want to front load all the information because we all know that RTI is intimidating and it seems like a lot of extra work. But if we go through, hey, here's what we're going to do right now, identify your kids, know what their goals are, and then as we get to, as Marty and the team send us the drill down, we will drill down with teachers. I found that it's more beneficial to have them drill down their class than me to give them a list and say, hey, these are the kids that you need to think about. So just kind of starting simple and then meeting with them one-on-one or in small groups during their conference time helps too, because you have teachers that are really, really great at RTI and could do it with their eyes closed and get the process, and then some that need their hand held a little bit more. But the great thing is that once they see the benefit and they see, hey, like I can provide accommodations for this student because I'm documenting correctly, I'm going to see this kid move. And so just be gracious and give them some grace. Slow it down, simplify it. Make a copy of my spreadsheet. I'm happy to talk to any of you guys if you need, just kind of like to pick my brain a little bit. Drill down, like I said, have them do it themselves, more beneficial. Decision point meetings, we have already had discussions on the students that are currently receiving Tier 2 or Tier 3. And then once we have the drill down, we will meet with grade levels to determine their 20th percentile and below and discuss each of those students and whether or not we think that, hey, it was a bad testing day or they are struggling. We need to develop a goal.
All right, so those are the different components. I want us to take a little bit of time working on some of the things. We've done a lot so far, so I want us to take us some time to go through some of those links, collaborate with the people around you that are kind of doing the same things that you're doing, see what they're doing, kind of plan all those things out, start planning when you're going to put those things on your calendar, when you're going to do your decision point meetings. You can, every 6 weeks, have that a calendar scheduled. That way you can make sure you don't miss any of those. So go ahead and we'll do about 5 to 8 minutes or so to kind of look through all those things. If you have questions, we can help you with those pieces. All right? You can also schedule your one-on-one presentation as well if you want to. All right, so let's go ahead and come back. So of course we have all the different departments that are able to support you on any of your needs. You can always reach out to me, and then I can make sure I get you connected to the right person. So if you need any support, make sure you reach out. Again, there's different departments that support different things, so we want to make sure you're supported. And so let's look at the next. So there's some upcoming Tuesday trainings. If you haven't seen Lisa's link for the Tuesday training, it's at the top. That's going to be important because there's a lot of different trainings that are occurring. So today, again, Lisa's doing the MAP reporting training. So everything you need to know about reports and exigents, make sure you attend that if you haven't. That'll also be recorded, and I'm going to add that to the website, the Google site that I have. Also, September 12th on the Tuesday training is going to be all about MAP reports and how to use those to support instruction. So that's another Tuesday training. And then September 19th is just if you need support with drill down process, that's going to be available on the 19th. So that's just if you need extra support with that, if you need any type of guidance, that'll be on the 19th. So again, make sure you are looking through those trainings. RTI was placed on the very end. Save the best for last. So make sure you scroll over to the RTI column to see all those trainings. We'll also have, I didn't put it on there, but we'll also have a training after the winter test on how to look at growth and use that to support students. So NWA is coming in for that one. They're also coming in for the one as well on using reports to inform instruction. So NWA will come in those 2 times to support those. Any questions on the upcoming trainings? Okay. So again, my Google site is there. If you need anything, please reach out. My name, number, email is on there. So we have 2 exit tickets before we go. If you go turn your note catcher into the first page, you can write down one thing that you learned, at least one thing that you learned today. And then on the back of that note catcher, there is a Google form. Please fill out that Google form before.